Hello, Justin Williams speaking. And today, as part of the Autism Awareness video collection, I will talk about some of my favorite TV shows and movies I got. And trust me, I had lots to select for this day. And now, to start things off, I would do like a real Canadian original TV show. Oh, Chili Beach. A show about a place called Chili Beach, home to two Canadian guys, Frank Shackelford and Dale McDonald, who just try to spend their everyday lives, though sometimes odd things happen to them every now and again, such as disputes over their local teams, Montreal Tortillas and the Toronto Tarragons, basically parodies of Canadian hockey teams and disputes over which team is better. It started out as a web series back in the early 2000s, and by the mid of it, it was released on CBC for at least 3 seasons. It is a good show, though I think the main drawback from the show itself is the way they represent Canadians, especially how they think of us. Yeah, and trust me, sometimes I think animated sitcom shows often depict Americans in the most crudest, the most rude way possible. And it does frustrate me from time to time. Yeah, it's just the kind of thing that makes some people think that Americans are pretty bad. But believe me, I've met some people that are actually from the States itself. Especially around the Fan Expo with some of the people I've met. And they do have some good people down to our fellow neighbors to the south. And then we have this one, Batman Assault on Arkham, which takes place in the Arkhamverse. Basically a universe set in the events of the Arkham games. Batman Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, Arkham Knight, Arkham Origins. Even the new Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League are all part of the same universe. And in this story, the Suicide Squad, at least an earlier version of it, were sent to Arkham Asylum, and just to basically try to steal information from the Riddler, by infiltrating in the asylum itself. And infiltrate a storehouse where each of Batman's rogues his own possessions were being stored away. Even lesser known villains such as Maxi Zeus and Killer Moth, for example. And they did add a good lineup of villains in that team. Like characters like the Black Spider or the KG Beast, and so forth. And I also have The Future's Wild, speculative evolution documentary that asks the question, what would life on Earth be like when somehow we disappear? from the face of the earth. Though, yeah, it is a good show, though personally, a world without people sounds like a nightmare. Because what other sort of life could become sentient, realistically, without people anyway? And it's just the kind of thing makes you feel scared of the unknown. And here I have the new Three Stooges, an old cartoon from the 60s, which stars the Three Stooges, yes, the originals actually, Mo Howard, Larry Fine, and the most current and the last of the Third Stooges before the act was retired, Curly Joe Dorita. With each of the cartoons go through like wacky misadventures with the Stooges, with more of the cartoonish humor, and it's good. With each cartoon started off as a live-action segment. Though in truth, there are more cartoons than live-action segments. And according to Curly Joe, the reason is that they only had enough resources to film only some of the live actions. I forget the number of them really. Maybe between around 30 or 50 live action segments with over 100 cartoons in total. And they do sometimes go back to their old classic gags from the original shorts in Columbia Pictures during their heyday. It was pretty much like the last time, along with a couple of movies, the last time they did their act before retiring around the 70s. And here I have the whole collection of Prehistoric Park, which stars real-life zoologist Nigel Marvin, who explores the prehistory to rescue creatures on the brink of extinction from prehistoric times. And believe me, Nigel is a real person, and he does go for real adventures out in the wildernesses of the world. And I've seen a lot of creatures out there. And here I have one of 5 seasons of one of my favorite shows when I grew up as a kid, Get Smart. A show created by a legendary actor and producer, Mel Brooks, which tells the story of a secret agent in Washington, D.C. by the name of Maxwell Smart, Agent 86 of the Control Organization, whose main solo purpose is to fight against the forces of evil, especially their arch nemesis, Chaos, the evil organization that's tried to take over the world so many times through political means, since after all, it was the Cold War back then during the 60s, when pretty much Iron Curtain countries are basically major enemies, including the Russians, which even to this day they're sometimes considered enemies because of the way they run their government. But we have good people that come from Russia anyway. So not every person from each nation is all bad. Because some people just want to escape from the cruelties of war and what their countries do to go to places like here in Canada and the United States, where we do as best as we can to give them as much freedom as they needed, to find good work, and enough resources to provide for families, including food and shelter. And above all, all the main like finances they needed to be able to afford them. Here I have two cartoon series based on the sitcom show Gilligan's Island, like this. It's basically a story about 7 people that aboard the SS Minnow, a, a small vessel that touring vessel that left Honolulu Harbor there when suddenly they got caught up in a tropical storm. Without warning, they got grounded on an uncharted island, basically miles from Hawaii. Each of the and above all, the castaways learned exactly how to get along with each other, like it was a family. Though they do go for some good topics that were basically around the time, such as developments in space programs like NASA, even how the world thinks of what's going on, such as how the Russians were considered enemies, and how people are alike across the states as well. Even some topics of radiation, which is poorly known at the time, it was basically sort of before power plants were made, and and it also gained cartoon series made by Filmations, which is Universal made and sort of like debunked. Well, actually, it's sort of like shut down after the 80s. First was The New Adventures of Gilligan, still the island adventures, but different. Because not all cast members of Gilligan's Island came back. Don Wells was busy doing another show or something, so the voice of Mary Ann was different. And Tina Louise, well, being a Hollywood actress as he is, much like her character Ginger Grant, just basically quit the role. At least even before the show was even made, because like some Hollywood types back then, they're like all about their image, their public image. They just don't like to be seen as something. They just don't like to be seen like more as a character that's outside the spotlight. But Don Wells did return on Gilligan's Planet, which was something. It was considered like among the final roles of Jim Backus, which of course, and Natalie Schafer, because Jim Backus and Natalie Schafer are the first of the cast members to pass over. Then Alan Hale Jr., the skipper, Bob Danforth plays Gilligan, Russell Johnson, the professor, and recently Don Wells passed away from COVID about 4 years ago. And now Tina Louise is the only survivor to this day. And what I like these programs is that Gilligan has a new animal friend each one. For New Adventures of Gilligan, it was a monkey named Snubby. Though he's more like an ape because he's got no tail. And in Gilligan's Planet, it was a reptilian alien by the name of Bumper. And they both had similar things in common. They are rather mischievous, rather smart for a species, since Gilligan usually helps teach them how they do work together to help. And of course, did you know that Bumper may have been based on a canceled idea on Gilligan's Island about Gilligan meeting a dinosaur? which goes to show you that sometimes a canceled idea may be recycled for a project later. And it works for all shows, movies, and video games too. Yeah, this is why you should always store and if you're creative, you should always store your ideas, because they may come in handy at a later time. The next one should be one of my favorite movies, at least one of the early 2000 movies growing up, Dinosaur Island. Sort of like a modern retelling of the famous book, written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, The Lost World. And it's the same guy who wrote the Sherlock Holmes books. Basically a story about a group of people who explores literally a lost world filled with dinosaurs. All inspired by the tepuis in Venezuela. Extremely high rock faces that go up hundreds of feet into the sky, which is also home to the highest waterfall in the world, Angel Falls, which inspired the movie Up. And next one is The Life of Birds by David Attenborough, which I grew up with as a kid, and did help grow my fascination with birds and how they behave in the wild. It's like and seeing these documentary shows by by Attenborough himself are just very fascinating. It really gives you a scope of what nature really is. Like, if you think about it. In fact, his brother, Richard, is a famous actor. He's even in Jurassic Park as John Hammond, founder of Jurassic Park itself, and basically helped develop the idea of bringing dinosaurs to life by extracting DNA from mosquitoes trapped in amber. And this one may be a true feature because they share the same concepts. Scooby-Doo series where Mystery Inc. itself actually meets famous people. Like it's an actual thing, really. Which starts up with this, the new Scooby-Doo movies. Almost complete collection. Mainly because the one episode that guest stars the Addams Family was absent due to MGM having ownership of the Addams Family presently. But believe me, it is a good show where it combines like the classic show. You see, the reason they did this sort of thing, because it's the only way for the Scooby-Doo franchise to continue. And back in the 70s, they did a lot of experimentations involving Scooby-Doo, starting to expand upon the original mystery-solving formula, from using guest stars like these to even family relatives, mainly from Scooby-Doo's side, from his cousin Scooby-Doo, even his heroic nephew Scrappy, which people just don't like because he seems to basically push aside Fred, Velma, Daphne, and at the same time, he's more behaviorally, he's the opposite of his uncle. And at this point, it's just no way to say Scrappy-Doo, being that he's just been hated for so long. But that's okay. They can always try family members from the other game members too, which they should have done on it a long time ago. Anyway, in the original new Scooby-Doo movies, they used all the people who were famous at the time. Some which they did include Batman and Robin, and actual some people whose acts are still kind of known, but the people who did them are basically either retired or just not alive anymore, such as the Three Stooges. Laurel and Hardy example is pictured on the cover here. Even some famous people like Sonny and Cher, Don Knotts, Phyllis Diller, Jerry Reed, etc. Even the famous Harlem Globetrotters. And in Scooby-Doo Guess Who, it's pretty much the same, except they use more famous people. They're still with us, still breathing. The only one of them has passed over recent times, which was Alex Trebek, the host of Jeopardy, and real fact, he's as Canadian as me, born in Sudbury, Ontario itself, which I have been there at least once. And this whole guest star idea, to me, I thought it was a great idea. I thought it was cool, really, because, yeah, which makes me wish I want to be part of this kind of mystery, these kind of mysteries as well, to see what it's like to be in a Scooby-Doo episode or a movie, mainly as myself. And whatever mystery it is, the only thing that really matters is that it's set in Canada, like maybe around London or even Toronto, and use like a monster that's local around these areas. And the best that I know of is the Toronto Tunnel Monster. And here I have the Funky Phantom, which is basically a clone of Scooby-Doo, about these three kids here and their dog meeting a ghost of a cat, and one of the revolutionary men named Mudsie. He was basically scared of things, even though he is a ghost. And it's pretty funny. And point of fact, that Skip here is voiced by one of the members of a famous band from the 60s called the Monkees. Mickey, he voices him. And I have a friend that has actually seen him multiple times. And here I have The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, which I grew up with when I was a kid, watching YTV sometimes at my nanny's house. Yeah, which is basically simple, about adventures of a young boy who's abnormally smart, named Jimmy Neutron. Though his inventions do have flaws about it, and as cartoon logic dictates, every time he invents something, usually he thinks nothing could go wrong, when in truth, every time people just make things with science, something would go wrong, which is why you need extensive testing and see if they're worth it before they just cancel them until the future where we have better resources and better knowledge. Though Jimmy Neutron does use his inventions to save the day, either from his own inventions, or most of the time, about villains that try to take over town or even try to destroy the world. And he does it with his best friend, his own friends, Carl Sheen, Libby, Andy, like a whole bunch of friends. Which it also does and as among the cast members was Rob Paulson, who I've met at least twice before, through Comic Con, the Forest City Comic Con that's here in London, and the Fan Expo I think it was last year, in Toronto. Here I have an American Tail movie collection, mainly because as I grew up with 50 Goes West, which is the second movie. Yeah, I just really like these movies because of one particular character, Tiger, a cat who is vegetarian and voiced by Dom DeLuise. He's a really funny guy. I Yeah, acting like sort of a silly guy who sometimes gets scared of things. And that's Tiger, just a vegetarian cat who's practically scared of everything. And here I have the Clue movie based on the classic board game, which tells a story about 1954 New England in the States. It was about 9 years after the Second World War ended, as America was recovering. A group of about 6 guests come into the mansion, but only one of them acts as a murderer. And it's a great movie because, much like some movies, this one has an all-star cast, including Tim Curry, pictured here as the butler Wadsworth, Christopher Lloyd, the Doc from Back to the Future, here as Professor Plum, and Martin Mull, pictured here, the voice of the hacker from PBS's Cyber Chase as Colonel Mustard. And this movie is unique for having 3 endings, because as many board game players know, the game of Clue is about trying to find out who murders, and it's different the outcome is different every time. So all you have to do is try to figure out who done it. And this movie has 3 endings. Yeah, and I'll give you a spoiler about each one. First ending was Miss Scarlet, picture here, played by Leslie Ann Warren, who basically did the murders, along with Yvette, who acts as a helper, or at least an accomplice. And point of fact, the actress who played her, Colleen Kemp, is actually a relative of a friend of a stepsister I have. In the second ending, Mrs. Peacock did all the murders. In the final ending, the true ending, has pretty much all of them did the murders. Even the butler did one too, who turns out to be the real Mr. Body. And here I have Wallace and Gromit: The Wrong Trousers, which is my favorite Wallace and Gromit film of all time since I saw it as a kid. Basically it came after like The Grand Day Out, and it won Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film in 1993. Thanks to Aardman Animation Studios' unique form of stop-motion animation using plasticine figures. Basically, it's all a story about what when Gromit got a pair of mechanical techno trousers seen here for his birthday. At the same time, Wallace needed to bring up some money to pay the bills. But so they basically had to let the room out. Turns out to be a penguin seen here who's actually a robber named Feathers McGraw, who often uses a rubber glove to make a disguise to be mistaken for a chicken. But thanks to the duo, they managed to stop him and bring the diamonds he tried to steal back, sent him behind bars, and got reward money that paid off all of their debts. And here I have Here Comes the Grump, which is basically a TV series created by Patty and Freeling, as in Friz Freeling, who created many Looney Tunes cartoons back in his day. But then he went independent because of some difficulties with Warner Brothers around like the 60s, which is on this show, released in 1968 or something. Basically, it's a story about this boy named Terry, who was somehow warped in. He soon came into a magical dimension far away from his usual home, where he meets Princess Dawn and her pet Bib, who needs Terry's help to find the Cave of the Whispering Orchids, which has a crystal key to the Grump to release the Grump's gloom spell. It's pictured here, along with this pet dragon who often sneezes, which is based on a Bugs Bunny cartoon where Yosemite Sam had a dragon that constantly sneezes, which is pretty funny, believe me. In point of fact, the voice of Terry is actually the very guy he used to play Dennis the Menace as. Then I have Legends of the Superheroes, which is like basically sort of an experimental show about about a take about DC superheroes in live action shows, starring Adam West and Burt Ward as Batman and Robin from the 1966 Batman show, and he even did include famous DC superheroes and villains, which does include Frank Gorshin, who once again played the Riddler, which is pretty cool to point of fact. And it didn't exactly do well, but I think this was pretty good myself. Especially the first one, where the superheroes had to work together to basically save the world from Dr. Sivana and his own, like, Legion of Doom or something. Made above villains like Giganta, Sinestro, Mordru, Solomon Grundy. And then I have one of my favorite movies growing up, Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Yeah, and to tell you the truth, among seeing the movie a few times I was a kid, I was kind of scared of Diesel 10, especially how menacing his claw is. But the more I know about Diesel 10, the less scared I am. Yeah. And of course that the voice of Thomas himself is the current voiceover announcer for White TV, Eddie Glenn, which I would wish to meet one day, and is a friend of my acting coach. Then I have the Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed, which I actually love because the fact that classic monsters from the past come to life through these costumes. They still have the actual concepts. They could have been stored in warehouses for now, but they're images of the costumes, like in set photos, including a special event in Brazil at a mall somewhere about lesser-known monsters of cinema, which includes some of these. Which my favorite was Chickenstein, to the point where I even wish that I even have an exact duplicate of the costume to act as a cosplay idea for someday, really. And last but not least is the Land Before Time collection, which basically is which I did grow up as a kid, which tells stories about a group of young dinosaurs as they tried to survive. I have like at least everything that the world has on them, from many dangerous predators to natural disasters and events that they never experienced before. Starting with the first film about searching for a place called the Great Valley, of which our heroes managed to find together by taking Littlefoot's own late mother's advice, and they actually did find it. And that's pretty much it I got for now. See, I'm pretty much like some people who are like my generation that seem to have a good collection of movies and even seen a couple of shows before too, such as shows mainly from PBS White TV Treehouse and TVO Kids as well. And maybe some TLC stuff where he used to have a kids part of it called Ready Set Learn. And believe me, there's lots of great stuff around the 90s that maybe if any people that grew up in the 90s see so should show them to your kids as well. Or maybe some of your nieces and nephews or something. That's all I have. So join me next time on our fourth and final video where I can explain, well, basically everything, a couple of things that I've always wanted to do in my life. And if you like to talk about any of that stuff that I showed you in this video, please, you can comment about them below. Oh, and you can even ask me some questions. So maybe I can give you some answers. Even if I might have to do a bit of quick research myself and just answer back to you. And until then, this is Justin Williams signing out. Justin out.